Zayin, Amud Aleph. Today's Amud is being learned. L'schud Yosha ben Dina Diana, Yael bat Rivka, Menashe ben Asi, and Leilui Nishmat, Tzipora bat Yitzchak. Now we started a very interesting topic on the bottom of Vav Amud Bet. The Gemara said that Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Now what Rabbi Yehuda are we referring to? So the Gemara, the machloket that we have in Mishnayot in Masechet Baba Kama and Avkuf, that you gave some raw material to an expert, to somebody that was supposed to dye your wool. For instance, the case of the Mishnah is over there. You gave raw wool to this guy that's expert to dye the wool red, and he dyed it black. Or vice versa, you wanted black, now he dyed it red. So what exactly is the obligation of a monetary obligation that he has towards you and you have towards him? And we mentioned that it's a machloket Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. On one hand, says Rabbi Meir, noten lo demet simro. He has to pay him the amount of money that the raw material he gave him was worth at the time that he changed. Why? Because a person that's your shaliach, your poel, is working for you. If he changes from the shlichut, from the agency you gave him, he becomes a gazlan at that moment. He's a thief. He stole your raw material the moment he decided to change and do his own thing. So therefore, at that moment that he stole it from you, he owes you the price of what he stole at that moment. So therefore, says Rabbi Meir, if you want to get the black dyed wool right now from him, for instance, imagine now the price shot up and the price of the raw material is not so much, but the black wool is. So you say, give me the black wool. He could say, I'm not giving it to you because I stole it from you at that moment. It's mine. I have a kinyan of gezela. Because when I changed the looks of the raw material, now or I took a block of wood and now I made something out of it. You wanted a chair, I made a table. Same material I used. You went to Lowe's, you bought the regular material. I made something else. Now you want that, I could tell you, well, it's mine. Because I have a kinyan, beshinui, when I changed it, it became a different thing, and now it's mine. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says he can't do that. Because now he's going to be upper hand. He always has to have the lower hand because he's the one that changed. He's the one that did the wrongdoing. And hence, we see which one is cheaper. If the amount of money that he spent is less than the amount of money that it advanced, in other words, if the raw material was X amount of dollars and now is $50 more, but he spent only $20 together, so if the amount of increase in value of the end product is more than the money you spent to get there, then you pay the minimum amount of the expenditure and not the larger amount of enhancement. But if the enhancement was less than the amount of money that you spent, then you pay the enhancement. Always, the poel, the one that decided to change and stole, so to speak, his yado al tachtona, he has the he has the disadvantage, and you have the upper hand. So let's read this together. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, אם השבח יתר על היציאה נותן לו את היציאה. אם היציאה יתרה על השבח נותן לו את השבח. Says the Gemara, Ahdarinhu Rabbi Yosef Laper. Rabbi Yosef was unhappy with this. He said, wait a second. I need you to say this to me. This is pashut. Why is this pashut? Because the machloket v'achar kach stam hilcheta kistam. Whenever you have in Mishnayot that Rabbi puts a machloket first, he brings the machloket Tanaim, as an equal, machloket Tanaim, and then afterwards, in a different place in Mishnayot, he tells you the halacha again, but this time he only brings one of those two shitas. Of course, it means he wants to tell you that this is the halacha. So machloket, when you have machloket Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in regards to this dyeing business of dyeing the wool, and then I find in Masechet Baba Metzia, this was in Baba Kama Daf Kuf, and later on in Baba Metzia Daf Ayin Vav, Rabbi brings this same thing, same concept, and there he only brings Rabbi Yehuda. So of course that means that Rabbi is paskening that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. I don't need you to tell me halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. I would know it myself. What's the hidush that you're trying to teach me? Let's learn this together. Says Rabbi Yosef, machloket bebaba kama. The machloket is in Mishnah Baba Kama, the Afkuf that we just mentioned, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Vestam bebaba mitzia, and the stam is in Masechet Baba Mitzia. What does it say over there? The Mishnah says in Masechet Baba Mitzia. Again, this is the Daf Ayin Vav over there. Kol hameshaneh yado ala tachtona. Whenever you change from the agreement that you made with somebody, the person that changes the agreement has the lower hand. The other one has the upper hand. Kol hameshaneh, if you are the one that changed from the agreement, yado ala tachtona, you are the lower hand. V'chol hachozer bo yado ala tachtona. Anyone that changes and that drops out of the agreement, yado ala tachtona, he also has the lower hand. Rav Huna mishum de'ein seder lemishnah. Now, why did Rav Huna feel, this is again, Rabbi Yosef versus Rav Huna. Rav Huna is the one that said halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So why Rav Huna felt that this needed to be said? In other words, Rabbi Yosef says, why do you need to tell me halacha like Rabbi Yehuda? I have certain general rules and regulations of the Mishnayot, and I would have known that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda just knowing the general rules and regulations. Why do you need, Rav Huna, why do you need to tell me that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? I would have known it. Rav Huna says, no. The reason I need to tell you is because ein seder lemishnayot. There is no seder. You think when you have in the seder of the Mishnayot printed on the shelf, you have Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra, Sanhe. You think that's the order that the Rebbe taught these things in the Beit Midrash? No, he taught them in a different order. En seder le Mishnah. Just for the fact that you have one Masechet printed before another Masechet in Shas doesn't mean that Rebbe taught that before the other one. It could have been very different at the time that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi taught them. And says Rav Huna, therefore, you never know which Masechet was before what Masechet. Maybe, you'll see this actually later on, about Rabbi himself. In Daf Yutet, later on in Masechet Avodah Zarah, it says that they were learning Tanakh, and one of the students didn't want to do, it was between Mishlei and Teilim, and he didn't want to do this, he wanted to do the other one, and Rabbi switched the whole seder of the yeshiva because it said, a person would learn only something that they really want to learn. They're hafetz, they have the desire to learn it. He changed the whole order. So who says that you know the order of what Rabbi taught first and what second and what third? The reason that he printed them the way he did, again, we generally speaking, we assume that the Rebbe was Mesader and he made the Mishnayot. It's what to talk about that. But certainly the way he taught them in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was not the same way, says Rav Huna. Hence, I need to tell you the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda because he would not have known it. What's the obvious question on that? The obvious question is, no, before that, the obvious question is, so what is this klal telling me? We all know, we all agree that there is a klal, there is this law in regards to Mishnayot that machloket v'achar kach stam, halacha ki stam. So if you would ask Rav Huna, according to you that there is no order, when we say machloket v'achar kach stam, what does that mean? Where do you find that you have machloket and then stam? You never know if this is then or this is then. So how do you understand the general rule of thumb of machloket v'achar kach stam? Rav Huna has to deal with that. That's the obvious question the Gemara is going to ask now. Says the Gemara, Ihachi machloket v'achar kach stam lema en seder lemishnah. So let us say that because there is no seder lemishnah, we don't know at all which one is achar and which one is lifnei. So it says the Gemara, Rav Huna ki lo amrinan en seder bechad masechta. You know, Rav Huna says, in one masechta, of course, there is seder. In other words, when Rabbi started, for instance, teaching Sanhedrin, and you have Perek Aleph, Perek Bet, Perek Gimal, that order is the order he taught in the Bet Midrash. He wouldn't change and first teach the last perek of, perek chelek, because it's more gishmak in Sanhedrin, and then go to perek ait. When he started Sanhedrin, he taught completely so therefore, if you have in Mishnayot of the same Masechta, that in the beginning Rabbi brings a machloket, and then later on in the same Masechet, Rabbi brings a stam, that's when we say, says Rav Huna, machloket v'achar kach stam halacha ki stam. But in two different Masechtot, we don't say that. So by the way, I want to just open a parenthesis, it's an important one. Ba'alei Tosafot, when you have Tosafot printed on the side of your Gemara, it sounds like we have Rashi, and then you have Tosafot. But it's not so. Rashi is one person. But Tosafot is over 100 people. In the course of more than 100, 150 years, the Yeshiva of Ba'alei Tosafot, a number of the names, the bigger names are mentioned already. The Ri, the Rabbeinu Tam, the Ritzpah, the Rashba, all of those are mentioned in the Tosafot. But the actual people who were involved is a span of time that is much longer than one generation, and also it is many more than one person. So when you want to ask from a Tosafot in one Masechta to another Tosafot in a different Masechta, the rule is you can't really ask a contradiction from one Masechta Tosafot to another Tosafot in a different Masechta, because it may be a different Baal Tosafot that wrote that. But every Masechta within the same Masechet, you could ask, wait a second, earlier on the Tosafot said this, now the Tosafot says this. Within one Masechta, it has to work together, because the compilation of the Tosafot on every Masechta was consistent, and therefore you could ask from one place to another, but you can't ask a contradiction from a Tosafot in Masechet Brachot to something in Menachot. Right? So different people wrote it, and therefore it's not necessarily a stira. So says the Gemara, Betere Masechti Amrinan. When you have two Masechtot, we say En Seder LeMishnah, says Rav Huna. Rav Yosef says, no. Kula Nezikin Chada Masechta. Rabbi Yosef says, all of Nezikin is one Masechet. All of Nezikin is one Masechet. What does that mean, all of Nezikin is one Masechet? In other words, before we explain that, Rabbi Yosef is saying, the whole Nezikin, which Baba Kama and Baba Metzia is a part of it, is one Masechta. So therefore, when we say, when Rabbi says a machloket in Baba Kama, and a stam in Baba Metzia is like in the same Masechta, and I don't need you to tell me halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. I know it myself from the klal of machloket v'achar kach stam. Now, when we say kula nezikin chada Masechta, it does not mean the entire seder nezikim. Makot, Shavuot, Avodah Zarah. No, it just means Baba Kama, Baba Batra, Baba Metzia. The Tosafot say this in the beginning of Baba Kama. Yerushalmi says this clearly. Yerushalmi says that nezikin is 30 prakim. Yerushalmi says Kelim is 30 prakim, Nezikim is 30 prakim, and 30 prakim is because each one of these Masechtas have 10 prakim, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra, which also means Baba Kama means the first portion, Baba Metzia means the middle portion, and Baba Batra means the last portion of this Masechet. Called it, the name of the Masechet was Masechet Nezikin. The monetary the damages Masechta, right? Because it all talks about different financial aspects of interactions between people. So that's the 30 prakim of Baba Kama plus Baba Metzia plus Baba Batra. And hence says Rabbi Yosef, this is considered one Masechet. Because it's too long and too big, we divide it to subcategories. and we learn it together, but it's not that it's 3 different Masechtas, it is really the same Masechet. Says the Gemara. Or I could tell you, because this is mentioned, Rabbi Yosef will tell you, that this is different because it is set together next to a halakha psuka, which the Gemara says, Kol ha-meshaneh yado ala tachtona. The halakha is, Kol ha-meshaneh, when you change from the agreement you had between 2 people, in this case happens to be that you had the professional dyer and the guy that gave the wool, the raw material, Kol ha-meshaneh, if you had an agreement between 2 people, a professional and another person, yado ala tachtona, when you change, will be yado ala tachtona. And if when you back out of an agreement, a deal that you had, also yado ala tachtona, you will have the lower hand. Yes.
So does that mean that Rabbi Yosef does hold of this? Ain't said of the Mishnah. Does Rabbi Yosef hold of this? Ain't said of the Mishnah besides for Nesikin?
Yeah. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Lo yomar adam lechavero hanir'esh ta'amod. This is another teaching the Gemara is going to bring now. Number of teachings that we had in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. Once we mentioned him, so we're going to have a number of teachings that he is involved with. Says the Gemara, we learned, Lo yomar adam lechavero hanir'esh ta'amod imi la'erev. A person should not tell his friend on Shabbat. Now you want to hire somebody because your pipes burst in the kitchen and you need somebody on Motzei Shabbat immediately to fix it. So on Shabbat it's on your mind, and you see the plumber of the neighborhood on Shabbat walking to shul, and well, you don't want to say that I'm going to hire you for $250 to fix my pipes tonight, because that's like pretty obvious business talk, and we can't have business talk like that. So you tell him, do you think you could come over tonight? Well, come over tonight could mean let's go do Hazara Amud Yomi together, right? Could mean let's sit and learn B'Havruta or Shmuz, or it could mean that I'm a neighborhood guy and you're the plumber of the neighborhood, and when I tell you, can you come over to our home tonight, means we have something that needs fixing, and can you please be available? So can you say that or can you not say that? It clearly implies that you're hiring, but you're not saying anything, right? You're not saying anything that is work related, but the words imply based on the scenario, the way it's said, and the way his job is and your relationship with him. The last time you learned B'Chavruta was last Gilgul maybe. Now you never learned B'Chavruta. When you say come to my home at Motzei Shabbat, means we need you to work. So is that mutar or asur? So says the Braita, Lo yomar adam lechavero haniresh ta'amod imi la'erev. A person should not say to his friend, does it seem to you that you could be available tonight on Motzei Shabbat? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says there's no problem with that. Omer adam lechavero haniresh ta'amod imi la'erev. You could tell your friend this language, because this language does not imply direct work. You're not saying anything. It could be understood in different ways. And therefore, the way you're saying it is, like Rashi says, Ata nireh lashon havo davo. Lo yomar lo b'Shabbat, hanireh im ta'amod imi la'erev la'asod b'melachti la'erev. Like, does it seem to you that you could come, be available for my job? But Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says you could say it because it's not a direct implication. It's something that he understands that you may want him to work. And because you're not saying something clearly, that would be mutar. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Chana was one of the main disciples of Rabbi Yochanan. He said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hilcheta, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, that the person could say a language implying indirectly the need for work on Motzei Shabbat. Another halacha from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. Tanu Rabbanan, Hanish'al lechacha. It's a very important, super important, and not well known halacha. This is actually what we discuss here is going to be halacha l'maaseh as well. Tanu Rabbanan, Hanish'al lechacha v'timeh. If you ask the she'elah to a Chacham and he said it's Tameh. Right? For instance, you could have many different scenarios of this. It could be simply you bring a bdika cloth for nida, questions of halachot of nida, and one rabbi that is legitimate rav that knows, he says this is bad, it's not good, you have to wait, do it again, redo it tomorrow. Then you say, wow, this guy is too mahmir. I'm gonna go shop around and find the mekel over here. If you got a psak that something is asur, it's asur for you now to go shop around for different opinions. Now, why is this exactly? Why is this? Rashi says the reason is because kvodo shel rishon. Kvodo shel rishon means it's disrespectful to the authority of Torah. Once you asked somebody to go and shop around to somebody else is disrespectful, hence it's asur for you to do that. Now, if that's the reason, says the Meiri, well, if you tell the first person, he says, do you mind, I'm going to ask you this question, but you said it's asur, do you mind if I show it around, it's ishat, dahak, whatever it is, hacham, and he says, no problem, go. Then you could go because it's not disrespect any longer. He gave you the green light to go. It's all about him. And he agrees that you could go. Then Chazak Baruch, you could go. Right? Certainly, he himself could reverse himself. For instance, let's imagine you ask him some question about kashrut of something or whatnot. And he says it's asur. Right? And his psak was legitimate. Then he goes and works on it for next day. And he says, you know what? I looked into it. What I said is it's not to'ebet var mishnah. It's not that I made an obvious mistake. But, I looked into it more and I think there is room to be lenient. You could be lenient. He could certainly do that because he is not disrespecting himself. Right? But on the other hand, the Ravad, the Rosh, the Ran, they say that's not the Pshat. The Pshat is when a person brings a she'elah to a hacham, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu has set up the Torah Shebal Peh, when he paskins on this she'elah, that this is asur, now this becomes hefza de isura, it becomes a piece of isur. Imagine if you brought a meat to him, and he said this is terefa. Right? People used to actually bring chicken questions, right? Because people did shechita locally, and you had questions of whether it's tarif, it's not tarif, it's mutar, asur. Imagine you brought your question and he said it's asur. Now this thing becomes a piece of isur. The psak of isur is chal. It rests on this and changes the status of this from questionable status to a negative status. Now it is asur for anyone else to go against it because this already took effect and became asur, and nobody else could change that from isur to mutar. It's not about the kavod of the first rabbi. It is about you accepting his psak to begin with, and now he accepted this as a piece of isur. So perhaps even he himself can't reverse himself. Certainly you going to somebody else is not going to do it. Right? So, Chacham Ovadia in Taharat HaBayit, when he discusses this in regards to checking mar'ot nida, when you're taking a mar'eh to a Chacham, and you know it's shat dachak and so on, and you don't want to bound yourself. So you have to tell the Chacham to begin with, says, I'm not asking a she'elah lema'aseh. I'm not asking for, I'm planning to go around and ask. So that's already a different story. Because you're not disrespecting him, you already tell him from the beginning that I'm just, asking around, researching this thing. And also you're not accepting upon yourself necessarily the psak that's being given, because it's not betor psak, but it is more asking a question. But be that as it may, this is a halachic sugya that's there and many people are not aware of it. When a person gets a psak, is not correct for him for whatever reason of this or combination thereof, which the Ran discusses, it's incorrect and inappropriate for him to go shop around for other psak halacha. And says the Gemara, Lechacham v'timeh lo yishal lechacham v'yitael lechacham v'asal lo yishal lechacham v'yatir. Now, what do you do if you ask this simultaneously to two Rabbanim, to two Hacham? You came to the Bet Midrash, you posed the question, and immediately you have a machloket in the Bet Midrash, right? You have two Rosh Kolels, you have two Rosh Yeshivas, you have two poskim in the Bet Hora'ah, and one of them says Asur, the other one says Mutar, immediately. So who do you listen to now? Well, you look at who is bigger. What exactly is the parameters of, or when you deal with a machloket poskim, how do you go about doing something that is shanui b'machloket, that is, a subject of dispute within the poskim? So says the Gemara, if you have two Achamim, one of them says Asur, one of them says Mutar, one of them says is Tahor, one of them says Tameh. So what you do is like this. If one of them is bigger than the other one, either in his knowledge, he's known to be a more knowledgeable Tameh Hacham than the other one, even though that both of them are legitimate Talmidei Hachamim, but one of them is a bigger Tameh Hacham than the other one. Or B'minyan. What does Minyan mean? What does Minyan mean? Well, it means numbers, a majority. There are four ways in the Rishonim to understand this, right? Either Minyan means who's older. The Ravad learns like that. The Ravad learns, but Minyan means Minyan Hashanim. If someone is older and is more experienced in Psak, he actually has a halachic edge over the other person, which is a very interesting concept. In other words, you think that Torah is pure, intelligence and knowledge, but says the Ravad, the Gemara is telling you over here, it's not just pure liquid IQ, but rather it is when a person is more mature and has dealt with Piskei Halacha for longer, that mature Torah has an edge over a person that's not as advanced in that way. So age actually makes the Chokhmah a Chokhmah Mefuara, and Halacha would be like the older one. So that's one opinion. But the Ritba, for instance, says there are those who say Minyan means the minyan of the students that agreed with him in this. In other words, you have the two Rashi Kolel, Rashi Yeshiva, and then you have the students, right? So who did the majority of the regular people agree with, right? So you have the machloket, but the majority sided with one. So even though that they are not necessarily high level of poskim, they're students, but nevertheless, them siding with one of them also carries some weight. So that's the pshat. Or there are those who say, like very interestingly, that the Rosh in Tosfot Arash says the pshat is that you have more talmidim than he has. You have more talmidim than he has. In other words, you have a yeshiva, he has a yeshiva. You have 500 talmidim, he has 50 talmidim. And if you have a machloket between you and him, the halacha would be like you, even though that you're equal in knowledge. Why? Because like we learned together in Masechet Ta'anit Daf Zayin, the Gemara there says, Harbe lamati mirabotai. I learned a lot from my Rabbein. Umehavera yoter mehem. From my peers, I learned even more because you discuss, they challenge you. And umitalmidai, the Gemara says, yoter mikulam. More than anyone else, I learned from my Talmud, because the Rosh Yeshiva says something. You have 500 people in the Yeshiva, 500 brains that are evaluating what's being said and asking questions, and he has to answer them and clarify and re-clarify and go again and clarify. And that creates a certain level of purity in the knowledge and the chokhmah that's being given over, and hence the halacha is like him if he has more talmidim. But nevertheless, this is bechokhmah or beminyan helech acharav. Whoever is bigger in chokhmah minyan, you go after them. Ve'im lo helech acharav machmir. If you don't have, they're mamash equal. You don't have bechokhmah or beminyan. They're pretty much the same age, pretty much the same amount of talmidim. So says the Gemara there, you go after the machmir. You go after the one that's more stringent. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha Omer, Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, no, you can't always just be mahmir. B'shel Torah elecha achara mahmir. If it's a question in a matter that's biblical, as deoraita, then safek deoraita lahumra. Then you go after the one that is more stringent. But b'shel sofrim, if it's an issue that's derabanan, safek derabanan lekulam, helech achara mekel, you go after the one that's more lenient. Amar Rabbi Yosef, and here again Rabbi Yosef says, hilcheta Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. And now we're going to discuss as the last piece over here. We spoke about a person that was not a chaver, was not someone that was careful in halachot. Now we're going to discuss the halachot of tshuva. When a person does tshuva and they repent, basically, they want to change their status. Do we agree with them? Do we just say, the guy says, okay, I did tshuva. Do we now change their status, the way we deal with them? Now they're all of a sudden going to be dealt with like a chaver, that we trust them in everything? Or do we always keep that suspicion going because they are not necessarily relied upon and trusted as a person that always has been in that higher status? That's a very fascinating sugya that we're going to continue in the days to come. Zak Baruch.